Welcome back to another episode of Inside Texas Basketball. I'm your host, Evan Veith. I'm joined by Keenan Womack, and we're here with Inside Texas to talk everything about the last week for Texas basketball, the ups, the downs, a lot of downs, it's felt like, Keenan, and just everything about these last three games against Arkansas, Georgia, and Mississippi State.
Yeah, no, it's been a weird stretch for sure. Even the wins have felt weird. Hasn't been smooth the whole time. We'll get into last night later on in the show, but yeah, it was a weird series of games for sure,
Yeah,
and not the most
100%.
positive all the way through. But you get a win in there somewhere, which is nice. So yeah.
So they kicked that game off against Arkansas in this grouping, and Texas came into that game having lost four of their last five. That bad South Carolina loss. It kind of felt like a must-win game, and 39 points from Trey Johnson, a career high. I believe it was a Texas freshman career high, if I'm not, or all-time high, if I'm not mistaken. Pretty much the whole team that game as they went into Arkansas, played a pretty just a seven-man rotation, a pretty banged-up team, but couldn't get it done. Lost by five there in overtime. What did you see from that one?
I think what was most important about that game, even though they lost, was they figured out something with the curl screen action with Trey Johnson that worked really well. They ran it like 5 or 6 times in a row. I think they just kept running it over and over again because they couldn't really get much else going on offense, right? Tremont Mark is, I don't know how many points. I think he had 2 points in that game, 4 points,
Just
something
two
like that. Yeah,
on
2 points
field
in
goal
that
attempts.
game. Yeah, so he struggles mightily throughout that game. I mean, Jordan Pope is 2 for 7 in that game, but it was a good performance from Caden Shedrick. Got to give him credit there. But again, Trey was by far the star of the show, 50% from the field, 7 of 11 from three. But I think what really stood out was those rim attacks, was him
Mhm.
trying to slash, right? Him trying to get to the rim. They kept running the same screen at the elbow basically, and he would come off it and cut to the basket with the ball in his hands, and that worked for a while. I think it is important to note too that Edu Thero was out for that game, and that's
Yeah,
probably their best perimeter defender. I don't think he's maybe quite as good of a defender as people think. I think he gets caught ball watching sometimes, Thero does, but he certainly would have been extremely helpful in that game for them. I don't know that Trey goes for 39 points, but you can't squander a performance like that. When you have a
hmm
guy go for almost 40 points, he has half your points and he's doing it efficiently. He shot 50% from the field, over 50% from three. And so outside of Trey from three, the team was, let's see. So Trey was 7 for 11. The rest of the team was nine
yep,
for 26. So the rest of the team was 2 for 15
for
from
15.
deep. That's not going to get it done in SEC play, especially on the road, especially in a close game. And, before the game, I said, I think the best way for Texas to try to win this game is to muddy things up and make it a slow pace, low scoring game. Obviously, that did not happen. They did
Yeah,
lose the game, but they had opportunities to win the game playing this high flying offense, and they just couldn't do it. And it's unfortunate because Arkansas had such a short rotation. You would think playing up tempo would wear them out, but they still managed to get it done.
yeah, and I think what you said about Trey Johnson, that squandering of his performances, kind of just encapsulates what's been going on this year, where you've gotten this, that this game might have solidified him as like a top five pick in the NBA draft, or at least like a top seven maybe,
Yeah.
and he just drops nearly 40 points on a good team, a good Arkansas team at Arkansas, and the rest of your team still can't really put it together. 7 for 29 between Kaluma, Pope, and Mark. It was just that's the nail in the coffin. If Shedrick's the only other person giving you really anything offensively, then how can you expect to win it? And what's funny about this whole thing is we talked about on our podcast last week that the keys to winning this game for Texas can be getting to the rim, slashing, figuring that out, and winning some rebounding matchups and being physical, being better than them. They won the rebound battle. Trey Johnson was getting to the rim, but it felt like just everything else about this Texas team was completely behind and felt like it was just a game that they shouldn't have lost, but they did, and that felt like the season right there when they didn't win that one.
Yeah, it definitely had that vibe to it. I mean, you could tell both those teams were desperate for a win. And, Arkansas turns around, they get blown out by South Carolina too. So,
Mhm.
you think winner of that game gets into the tournament. It's like, well, I don't know, because they both got just shelled in their next games. Each team did. So I don't know what the bracketology says about Arkansas right now, but it can't be great. You talk about a roster that squandered talent, though. I mean, Arkansas has one of the most expensive rosters in the entire SEC. And they have a lot of the same problems Texas does, right? They have a lot of guys with overlapping roles. They don't have super defined offensive, like they don't go down the court and you know exactly what they're going to do every time. The players don't. And the injuries hurt. Not having Boogie Fland, huge problem. That guy is a 15 points per game, 5 assists a game type of talent, and I think a first-round pick in the NBA draft this year. But Texas had their opportunities to win this game. Like you said, they win the rebounding battle. They get almost double them up on the offensive boards, 10-6. Yeah. But just the shooting was horrendous from 3 outside of Trey. And when you have one guy going off, you just start doubling that guy, and that's what they started doing. When they would try to set an off-ball screen for him, they'd trap that screen. So that's what happens when you have one guy that's a flamethrower and the rest of the team is struggling.
Yeah, and it's pretty crazy that South Carolina's 2 wins in the SEC this year have been against the 2 teams we're talking about right now, because that's a team that has no business beating anyone in the SEC. When they lost their first game of the year to I'm trying to remember what the exact team was, like North Florida or something like that.
Yeah, I think they did lose to North Florida.
So it's a weird week for Arkansas, but they're ending out on top of it because I'm seeing bracketology has them as an 11 seed, like a first 4 in type team, whereas Texas is going to have to climb up, which we'll talk about in a bit. But let's head over to this Georgia game where, Texas just got worked by an inferior team, in my opinion, generally. But at least Arkansas, you see the talent on that team. But Georgia, Austin Newell wasn't that big of an impact. He wasn't the one that was killing you, a potential top 10 pick in himself. Damari Jr. went for 26 against Texas, and a game where Trey Johnson put up just 7 shots. Why was Johnson not shooting the ball?
Man, he wasn't getting a lot of opportunities to shoot the ball anyway, but they're also down a ton of points really quick. So it was like the game was over faster than they would have liked. Obviously you want to be in the game the whole time, but they didn't show up. Like, frankly, for a home game and an important, a game that is a determinant of whether you get into the tournament or not, and they just didn't show up. They got worked. Asa Newell had 10 points and 4 boards, and he had 2 fouls in the first 5 minutes of the game, so he didn't play that much. I think he played. I guess he ended up playing 25 minutes, but he didn't play much in the first half, right? He played maybe 8 minutes in the first half or something like that. So
that's where the game ended anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Right. The game was over a few minutes in, and Silas Demery, 26 points, 8 for 14. From the field. That guy was just cooking the whole game. It was hard to watch this game. There's not even a lot of analysis that can be done because it's not like Georgia had this beautiful game plan. It's like Texas just wasn't rotating on the perimeter hard. They weren't rebounding well. They were allowing drives. they got killed on the boards. They lost by 9 on the boards. They almost got doubled up in offensive rebounds. It was just a game where they didn't come out with any intensity. They were not defending hard in the paint. It was a bad game for Shedrick. He went 1 for 5, and he fouled out 2 turnovers, no blocks, no assists, 1 rebound. In 18 minutes, you just can't get that from your starting center and expect to win a game. Kaluma, God bless him, was out there, giving a damn 7 rebounds and 15 points. But you have to get some kind of balance from your scoring. And the fact that Trey took 7 shots the whole game, I don't think he took a shot in the second half. I think I heard that. I can't remember. It's that whole game is just such a blur. It's like nothing positive came from that. And at that point, that's a season defining type of loss. That's a maybe look for a new head coach kind of loss, because you cannot go into that game and lose like that on your home floor in a game this important. You just can't do it. It's just not becoming of an SEC team that wants to compete at the next level. It's just a really bad indicator of where this team was mentally that night. There's just no excuse to come out. It's not like Georgia shot the lights out from 3 either, right? They went 8 for 22 from 3. And they only shot 4 more free throws, but it was just clearly an effort thing. I don't know how else to say. And I don't like to assign that kind of blame to a college team, but they just didn't come out and play hard. I mean, that's frankly what happened, and it was really embarrassing.
Yeah, and part of that embarrassment is that you look at the way they've been playing at home, and they had close losses to Auburn and Tennessee, playing up to the competition there. They beat Missouri and A&M back-to-back games at home. Sure, they lost against Arkansas. Sure, they lost against Alabama, but it felt like they could at least hold down the home court at the Kentucky game as well. It felt like that was something where you could come into the Moody Center and they were at least giving you the wins there, and that was something that could propel their tournament odds. And it just you're down by like 27 at one point in the first half. Like it's not fair to the fans who come out and show up to the game. Like you have a responsibility in and of yourself to show up and show that you are at least playing for your job if you're Rodney Terry, or for the players aspirations to go out and win a championship. It's not going to happen, but show us that you're trying to do this. And it just felt like everyone who's not Trey Johnson or Arthur Kaluma that game, and Johnson not getting the shots up, at least he's working. It just felt like it was just a pure effort problem, like you said.
Yeah, I mean, an indication that it's a pure effort problem is Blue Cain had 9 rebounds. That's their guard, right? Like that guy was all over the glass. He had more rebounds than anybody on Texas did. I don't know how big Blue Cain. I can't remember how big Blue Cain is. Let me look it up because he's
listed at 6'5", and he's only had one game this year, apart from that one with over 5 rebounds.
Yeah, and it was against South Carolina, I think. So yeah, I mean, I guess he's bigger than I thought, but you're getting worked by a guard on the boards. You're getting completely destroyed by this guy, and he has more rebounds than anybody on your team. Your leading rebounder has 7. It was just a complete domination from the jump. There was just no point in this game where you thought, oh, Texas might get back into this thing, because the rotations were not tight. An indication that there's lazy defense going on is you have almost 4 dudes foul out. You had 3 dudes with 4 fouls and 1 dude who did foul out. That's lazy defense a lot of the time. That's you're late on a rotation and you foul to prevent them from scoring, or it's a reach in, or it's a block because you're out of position, you can't recover on time. That's a bad indicator when you have that many guys with that many fouls. And yeah, I mean, Georgia didn't shoot a ton more free throws than Texas did, but just the defense was not there. I mean, Georgia scored 83 points against this team, and Georgia has some guys, Asa Newell, like you says, top 10 pick in my book, probably. I mean, probably, definitely. But he didn't dominate this game. It's not like him and Santos Cyril combined for 30 points or something. You know what I mean? I mean, Santos Cyril had 6 points and 4 rebounds, and that's your other big front court guy. You have guys like Blue Cain dominating the boards, and Silas Demery, and I mean, again, it wasn't like one guy completely dominated. Like Demery was really good, but it was a team effort for Georgia. They just came in and they played better team basketball than Texas did. There's not a ton of X's and O's breakdowns to do because Texas was just late on rotations, missing recovery opportunities and fouling.
Yeah, 100%. I think as we transition over to the Mississippi State game from last night, a win, Homer, throw it over to Andre the Lawyer for us.
This video is brought to you by Andre the Lawyer. If you're injured, trust the team that secured millions for their clients and helped thousands of Texans with their injury case. Car wrecks, slip and falls, 18-wheeler accidents, on-the-job injuries, and wrongful deaths. Don't let insurance tell you what your claim is worth. Hire Andre the Lawyer to fight for you. Principal office is in Dallas, but they serve Texans throughout the state. So don't wait and call Andre the Lawyer today at 214-444-8808. That's 214-444-8808. The contact information is in the description.
And as we head into this Mississippi State game, we could maybe do a whole 40-minute podcast on this just one game and go over every single minute about what happened, because what a whirlwind of and an entertaining college basketball game that you would have loved to have been a neutral spectator to watch. But for Texas fans, probably pulling their hair out for most of it. Where do you want to start on this one, Keenan? Because there's a lot to talk about with this.
I mean, the inability to break a 2-2-1 press was shocking. It was shocking. Is another really bad indicator, right? Like that is a defense that 7th grade teams kind of run, right? Like if you're trying to full court press, you run a 2-2-1, you have 2 guys over the half court line. Texas could not figure it out. They turned it over several times, but even on the times they didn't turn it over, they got very close to turning it over. They got lucky on a couple of them, jump balls that went their way.
Yep.
throw a pass up, get fouled. Like there's a lot of things that bailed them out of those situations. And like, obviously the most inexcusable one is the one that led to the overtime period, which was the Jordan Pope, where he tried to inbound it between two defenders and it went right to the defender who just passed it. I think Kugel laid it in. Just inexcusable execution on that. It was truly really baffling how inept they looked in those sets. And if you don't figure that out, that's just going to be the go-to for every time. How would you want to bet Oklahoma watch that game? And they're like, all right, well, we should full court press them half the time or whatever. Rarely you full court press somebody for a full game unless you're Shaka Smart in 2012 or whatever. But it's a bad sign that you're struggling that much to inbound the basketball. It's not a good sign. And props to Texas because they had no momentum going into that overtime. I mean, they were shell-shocked, and they still managed to come out and win. Now, part of that is Trey hitting some big shots in the overtime period. But, I mean, I have a lot of respect for them for coming out and not just giving that up and rolling over and losing, because that's what I thought was going to happen. Right?
Agreed.
Mississippi State was a 6.5-point favorite in this game. Like, they were definitely favored, and they did a great job defending Josh Hubbard. I think he went 3 for 12. I mean, he ended up with 16 points, but yeah, I mean, that guy's an all-American, or not all-American, but all-SEC type of guard. Like, he's an all-SEC level guard. Kugel's a really good player too. Melendez, had 15. Cam Matthews is a guy I talk about a lot because of his defensive prowess. He's like a 6'7" forward. And Keyshawn Murphy too. I mean, the Mississippi State, I don't think they're a top 25 team. I know they're ranked top 25, but they're a better team than Texas is. And Texas went into their house and beat them. And it was really impressive to me that they were able to do that. And again, you saw Trey attacking the rack, and that's so important, right? He started doing that against Arkansas. You didn't see it. You didn't see anything against Georgia from anybody. But, I think that is a huge play into his professional career, because when he drives the rack, he gets fouled, and he's a great free throw shooter. And like I said on the last episode, when you're getting to the line and you're hitting these shots, you get into a rhythm, and then you start shooting better from the floor. Just seeing that shot go in is huge. So, there were a ton of issues last night, but like, I'm not going to sit here and complain because they won a quad one game on the road against a ranked team. I mean, it was shocking how it happened. It was the most frustrating, inexplicable win I've ever been a part of. But, I mean, they pulled it off. And so I have a lot of respect for them for just making that happen. They also shot really well from three. That was a huge part of it. I mean, Trey was obviously the catalyst there, 6 for 9. But as a team, they shot 11 for 23. And Mississippi State couldn't hit the broadside of a barn from three. They were 6 for 25. So,
yeah, and you had that sequence there at the end, and I think I want to start with that Texas turnover. They're up 4, 69-65, and they turn the ball over. Mississippi State gets a few extra chances on it, gets the game within 2. Johnson then has that really bad turnover on the other side of the court.
Yep.
But Texas somehow gets out of it without the game being tied up. Mark hits a jumper, and it's 16 seconds left, and you're thinking, this team's up 4. There's no timeout from Mississippi State. Like, just don't do anything stupid. This game is over, right? And then Julian Larry gets his feet tangled up with about 13 seconds left. Hubbard hits the free throws, and then that Pope turnover you talked about right on the inbound was just absurd. I think that was right when the Kaluma, the phantom out of bounds that they called him his foot.
Yeah, I think they called it
wasn't
back
at all.
Yeah.
They called it back. And then Pope turns it over. They get a layup on it, and then Mark inexplicably tries to do a turnaround 3 with extra time left, and Johnson never sees the ball.
What the hell was that?
And then right there, it was, what was funny about that for me is I was in the baseball press box last night, so I was watching the game along as Texas was playing Texas A&M Corpus Christi in baseball.
Yeah.
And I couldn't watch every single play, but I watched that last sequence and I go, this is over. Like all the guys in the press box, they're like, yeah, that's Texas basketball's done. But then somehow the game that we identified as probably the hardest one to win of these last 4, they pull out with it just a better overtime. They were just the better team in overtime, which didn't make sense. Apart from that press breaking, Tremone Mark had a great game, great end of the half, and great overtime period. He had 2 threes. I think Johnson also had 2 threes there in overtime. So, at the end of the day, like you said, we're not going to complain if this Texas team is getting a quad 1 win. Their only chance to really get back into the tournament was winning a game like this, and they did it. So props to Coach Terry for getting his team to rally there at the end in somewhere else. The crowd was getting wild there at the end when that the Kaluma step out and then also the turnover right there from Pope. I mean, Mississippi State fans probably thought, nice, we came back from this terrible Texas team, but no, good resilience from the Longhorns. Jason Kent, I think I remember seeing your tweet about that. He played a really good game.
Best of the season for him, at least in conference play, easily.
Yeah, so I think that's you go ahead.
Oh no, go for it.
Oh, I was just saying it's good to see that the bench unit there. Onyema and Cody played 8 minutes combined. Larry wasn't too impactful, but Mark and Kent combined for 33 on very efficient shooting. Kent almost had a double-double. He had 9 points, and then Trey Johnson, another efficient 20-plus point game. That's your winning formula if you're Texas, and they've got a game coming up against Oklahoma that we can start to transition into here. But that's got to be a win no matter what for multiple reasons. But the real thing right now is we're going to talk a little bit about bracketology is how much does this win actually matter for Texas's chance to get into the tournament. And right now, if you go over to ESPN, they have Texas as a first 4 out team, which they're in the same grouping as Oklahoma in that with Xavier and North Carolina, which you'd think, you win this game, maybe you win a game or two in the SEC tournament. ESPN has you in as an 11 seed, very likely. You go to CBS and they have Texas way down on the bubble. I mean, they're below Oklahoma as well, but Ohio State, Nebraska, North Carolina, Indiana, about 12 teams are above them. So CBS doesn't see this as even close to a tournament team even with the win. So outside of just rivalry's sake, Keenan, do you think this is a game that Texas has to win to get into the tournament, or is the season over at this point?
Well, I wouldn't say it's over just because maybe you win this game, then you win a couple in the SEC tournament. I think if you do that, you're in. It's likely they'd play Arkansas in the first round, I think, of the SEC tournament, the 12-13 game. But, this is a better team than Oklahoma, I think. Oklahoma has 2 really good players in Jeremiah Fears, who I think's lottery pick, and then Jalen Moore, who's starting to get a little bit of NBA draft buzz. So they have those 2 guys who are great players. Outside of that, they got a bunch of Jags. And, it's a game that, for pride's sake, I would like for them to win. For Trey Johnson's sake, I would like for him to build some momentum. This isn't like the NBA where you tank these last games, you get a better draft pick. That's not how it works. Every win, there's never a drawback to winning in college basketball. You have to, and I'd like for them to build some momentum going into the SEC tournament. Now, they lose this game to OU, the season is certainly over. It's probably 100%. Still over if they win, but I would like to see them go out with a bang at least. Go out, sweep OU, sweep OU in your first season in the conference in everything. That would be fun. Again, Fears is a super talented player. This is where missing a guy like Weaver is kind of painful because if you're Texas, you don't have an athletic wing. I guess Pryor kind of is, but he's kind of a nothing on offense, so it's hard to play him a lot of minutes. But you need somebody who can guard Jeremiah Fears because Fears is lightning quick, can get to the rim, he can finish at the rim, he can shoot the ball. Really, really talented. I think lead initiator at the NBA level, but some think he'll be a combo guard. He is 6'4", so he has some size. But again, this is a guy who reclassified, right? This guy was supposed to play next year for Illinois, and then he reclassified, flipped to Oklahoma, and now he's one of their best players. He is their best player. Yes. I think both of these coaches probably won't be there next year unless OU has some buyout issue with Porter Moser. I don't know why they would bring him back. I would like for them to win just for pride's sake, for their sake. I don't want them to go out on a multi-game, losing a lot of their last few games, a good portion of the last few games. So, another thing about Trey is I meant to mention this in the Mississippi State talk, but what Trey has developed over the last few games, I was talking to a scout about this earlier today, actually on Twitter. We were DMing, and this guy writes and covers basketball. He's been doing it forever. And we were talking about his passing, Trey's passing, and how Mississippi State was doubling him a lot. They were trapping him, and he was still able to make good reads. There's one in particular that I remembered where he was driving the lane, and he got trapped in the lane, and he skipped it to Tremont Mark for 3, and Mark hit the 3. Mark was really good last night, by the way, too. But really, really impressive passing from Trey, and I think that's what differentiates him from a guy like maybe Buddy Hield, which is kind of the comp for him, I think, is that he's developing better defense and his passing has increased drastically. You know what I mean? Especially from the beginning of the year, he's just making better decisions. And, it'll be a good scouting matchup for Fears versus Trey because I think they're both top 10 picks, likely. But yeah, I want them to win because I want them to have a chance to get into the tournament. Because if, I don't know how much it helps you, but it definitely hurts you.
Agreed. Yeah. And I think on that point of Johnson's passing, it is the skip passes that have really been something that I've identified as well. That's been the strength of, he loves that right side. He loves going there and trying to attack a one-on-one. But when teams are rotating over and trying to add a big and then dropping a stopper guy down to face Shedrick or Onyema, there's going to be someone open on the other side of the court, whether it's on the wing, whether it's on the corner. And he's gotten a lot better, especially with Mark. There's a little bit more chemistry there with those two playing together. And I think that's been an important thing. And, going back a little bit to the Oklahoma matchup, I'm entering my final semester of college. I'm in my final semester of college. I'm about to graduate. I have never seen Texas basketball lose to Oklahoma in a basketball game. The last time they won was in January of 2021, and Austin Reeves was the leading scorer against Greg Brown and Kai Jones. So part of it is pride's sake. This Longhorn team wants to keep the streak going. No matter who's coaching next year, no matter who's on the team next year, how many of these players are on the team next year. Like, let's go beat that team in Norman. Let's go win this game and see what happens after that. Like you said, that point about there's no tanking. Like, yeah, they're bottom 5 in the SEC. We'd love to get a top 5 draft pick. That's not how it works. So, yeah, I think it's still a game that Texas can win. This Mississippi State game gave us a lot of confidence. And like you said, it's Fears. But then, their only big man is Sam Goodwin, who I feel like has been horrible for Oklahoma the last 3 years. They've got that young guy like Merriweather, I think his name is. But there's no size on that team that really intimidates you at all. So, it's a great game for Trey Johnson to be driving the paint. Great game for Jordan Pope to hit those kind of half floater, half step in shots that he does off the pick and roll. Tremont Mark attacking the rim as well. Like, Texas can beat this team by using size, which isn't always the case for the Longhorns. So there's definitely a path to victory here. And then, like you said, they'd probably be in that 12-13 matchup versus Arkansas and then play a team like Missouri or A&M in the next round. So Longhorns win those 3 games. Who knows what the brackets are saying?
Yeah, they're in a precarious position, no doubt. It's definitely touch and go, but they have a chance, right? Whether they deserve that chance is not for me to say, but they do have a chance. And it's like the line in Dumb and Dumber. So you're saying there's a chance. That's where they're at right now. Like, they have to win against Oklahoma, obviously, but this team is. It's frustrating because they just don't have good point guard play. And in college basketball, so much of your team is defined by guard play. In the NBA, I think it's more your wings that are the most important thing. I think in college basketball, it's your guard play that's most important. And, you put I always say LeBaron Filan because that's who Trey played with at Link Prep before he got to Texas. And he had a much easier time getting the ball in space because he had LeBaron Filan to collapse the defense and be able to finish at the rim. So if you have a point guard like Pope or Larry who, they have differing skill sets, neither of which have translated particularly well to this team, they don't score at the rim. Neither of those guys is a great finisher. It's hard to finish in college at the rim. It just is. But these guys are not rim finishers. And so when you don't have that, you're not going to get that defensive collapse that you need in order to get open looks for your guys. That drive and kick set is not going to work. If they don't trust your guy to score at the rim, if they can just play drop and have their big block your shot or contest it or just deter you from going into the paint. That's why it's nice to have a big point guard like a Doncic or a Cade Cunningham because they can body people up and they can finish at the rim. Now, those are 2 extreme examples, of course. They're like 2 of the best in the world. But, when they rebuild this roster next year, so much of what's important is going to be getting a guard that can finish at the rim, man. I think that's super crucial.
Yeah, and you brought up that point about NBA wings being so important. The best teams have guards that basically are wings. They're pushing that 6'5" number, like
jumbo creators.
Shea is 6'8", Cade Cunningham's I think around that number. And then on that point of Filan, Mark Sears is one of the best players in the nation, but on the number 7 team in the country, Filan's the secondary creator as a freshman. And that's because, like you said, he can get to the rim. He's a secondary guy who can make pass off to guys like Grant Nelson. So yeah, Texas is missing that. You'd hope that that's a portal addition next year. It's hard to get as much consistency from a freshman as you do, with Filan in Alabama. But let's head over just quickly to talk about this SEC tourney potential bracket. Things can still change, but we'll probably be recording next week's show right as the game's starting. So
Yeah.
we'd like to at least preview a little bit what's going on. So Texas right now would be in the game 2 next Wednesday, 12-13. It would be against Arkansas, and that'll be on SEC Network. If they were to win that game, they would go against the 5 seed, which I now don't have it up. The 5 seed currently, as it stands, would be Missouri, and that's a team that Texas has beaten this year. So, Arkansas, a team that's given them fits, but the Longhorns played a really good defensive game against Missouri at home. That's 2 winnable games, and we're talking about all you have to do is win 3 games. Not so easy for Texas the way they've been playing, but beat Oklahoma, beat Arkansas, beat Missouri, and suddenly, man, you're an 11 seed, and this is the team that when you have a fireballer like Trey Johnson, it's the kind of teams that people want to see win games, and great for television, but also a Sweet 16 potential, even if it doesn't feel like it at all. I wouldn't say this team could win a game, but also who knows if Trey Johnson combines for 70 points in 2 games and the Longhorns make a run in the tournament. So that tourney is probably, as well as this Oklahoma game, the most important game or 2 of the season for Texas.
Yeah, no doubt. And I don't think that would be the situation had they taken care of business against some of these worst. If they had beaten South Carolina and Georgia, you wouldn't be in this situation.
Mm-hmm.
I think you'd be squarely
Exactly.
in, but instead you lose by 20 to both of those teams. And here you are, and you're in a situation where you have 3 must-wins in a row. It's like a play into the play. It's like the NBA play-in. Like that's basically what they have. They have to win these next 3 games, or Trey Johnson's not going to play March Madness. I think that'd be a real shame.
Yeah, and it's just a waste if that's what you're seeing. Probably the most talented scorer since Kevin Durant on this team.
Yeah.
Not playing in March Madness is just such a disappointment for Texas fans, and obviously would maybe be the chance for we'll talk about it in future shows. Would maybe be the lead off to Rodney Terry not having a job in Austin. So we'll see how it goes. There's some good basketball to watch this week with the Longhorns and the rest of the SEC. It's such a good conference that you should just be watching these games when you can. So Texas going to be taking on Oklahoma in their next game. You got next week, you're going to have that SEC tournament. They'll play it no matter what. Every team gets in. So Texas basketball, real do or die time for the Longhorns. Anything else you have to say, Keenan, before we log off?
No, I just I am impressed that they pulled last night out, and they kind of maybe have a chance to save their season because they didn't roll over in overtime last night. I think that's really important to note.
Yeah, and good from the players, good from the coaching staff even, and we'll see how it happens with the Longhorns. I believe that game is on Saturday night for the Oklahoma series, so we'll see if Texas can keep that streak going. I think it would be 8 straight if they do win that game. So see what the Longhorns are up to. That's all from us, Keenan. Thank you all so much for watching Inside Texas Basketball. We'll be back next week around the same time and see some talk about whether it's Terry, on the chopping block or Texas has got a chance. So thank you all so much for watching. We'll see you next time.